didn't. Samuel.
A very good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on this OLDN membership conversation. It is my pleasure to welcome everyone from wherever you are. It could be morning, it could be afternoon or evening for some of us. A warm welcome to the Organization Leadership and Development Network. We are a community of scholars, a community of professionals who are committed to the field of organization development, the fields of leadership, and promoting sound governance. We hold monthly conversations as a way to enhance our capacities as members in the fields that we represent. So once again, I am Dr. Justin Chinoberekwe, and I take this opportunity to warmly welcome you to this session. I will take only 3 minutes before I hand over to our moderator for today. As the Organization Leadership and Development Network, we are a subsidiary of the Center for Organization Leadership and Development. And we exist to facilitate leading edge insight and practice in organization development through organization development informed publications, the provision of a platform for information exchange, and a forum for debate on organization leadership and development issues. And what we are about to do now is part of the platform that we provide to engage without boundaries in the field of organization development, in leadership, and in governance. We have different segments of the Organization Leadership and Development Network based on our members. We have members who are in banking and finance. We have members who are into community development, members who are into education, technology and health, HR, executive coaching, law and security. And we believe the organization development field is a multidisciplinary field. And as such, the application of all its concepts need to be applied in different fields. And with us today is Professor Jamieson, who is one of the early founders of the field, and would be glad to have you confirm this morning from where you are regarding our multidisciplinary approach. Dave is the author of the Global Use of Self report, which we share most of the time on our platform, and we continue to recommend this publication, and is going to speak into that today. Some of our events, the upcoming events, include the Organization Leadership and Development segment of Banking, Accounting, Finance, and Economy, which seeks to review contemporary issues in these particular segments and the application of OD, effective leadership, and sound governance in these particular fields. We also continue to raise the standard of organization development. We are an institute or institution that is founded on the values of organization development. And as such, raising the standard of OD is one thing that we prioritize. And as such, we do have accelerated organization development workshops. And I'm glad Dr. Prithi is with us, Dr. Doughton is with us, and Dr. Cornell is with us, who are helping us in facilitating conversations in raising the standard of organization development. I'm also glad to see Sasha Phiri, who will be hosting us, who will be part of us next week on a conversation with Madam Maureen and Professor Dumbu next week. We also do these conferences and workshops all in the name of advancing the field of organization development. We are committed to the field, and we'll be having our capacity development session as a demonstration of our commitment to leadership, our commitment to governance, starting from within. And Dr. Cornell, who is with us here, will be facilitating this leadership or capacity development session for those who lead the Organization Leadership and Development Network. As I indicated, next week we'll be having a conversation on driving mission impact and business results with Professor Dumbu from Zimbabwe, Maureen Omeibe from Nigeria, and Sasha Phiri. And that will be hosted by Fauzia Mazaz from Morocco. We also run the Organization Leadership and Development Network. Can I request people to mute their microphones? Kindly mute your microphone so that we don't get the background noise. Thank you. We also run the Organization Leadership and Development TV, where we hold conversations on OD, on leadership and governance, and we encourage every member on our platform to participate in these knowledge exchange conversations. We believe every information, every experience is worth sharing. And as such, we hold these short interviews as a way to exchange knowledge in the different fields that we have. So here is where we are today. The Organization Leadership and Development Network facilitates a conversation on use of self in leadership. I welcome you all to this conversation, and I'll hand over to Dr. Dotun Moses Jegede, who is the Vice President of our network, to introduce our guest speaker and to welcome everyone. Dr. Dotun, over to you. Okay, I see he's just joining, and I will ask him to welcome us later. For the meantime, I will ask Professor Grace to take it up from now. Prof. Grace.
Good afternoon. Good day, everyone.
Hello.
Good day, everyone.
Good day.
Good day. How are you?
Good.
Hi, Prof. Grace.
Yes, good to be with you this afternoon. So I want to appreciate the leadership of Organization Leadership Development Network for the opportunity you've given me to moderate this program. And I want to I welcome everyone to this highly educative and live impacting Zoom program. I want to also appreciate you for dipping a very strong net into the ocean to pick two big fishes that will be facilitating the program for us this afternoon, in presence of Professor Jamieson, who is the president of Jamieson Consulting Group Corporation, and Professor Phiri, Mushibwe, the Vice Chancellor of New University in Zambia. They are erudite scholars and distinguished individuals of international repute who are endowed with superb leadership skills. I appreciate you on behalf of OLDN for accepting to be our facilitators today. So let me welcome everyone to this meeting. The theme of today's conversation is use of self in leadership. Leadership has, we'll be hearing word leadership. Someone is disturbing. Please, let's mute our mics, please. Let's mute our mics, please. The theme of this conversation is use of self in leadership. We'll be hearing the word leadership, leadership, leadership. Some have different meanings to it, but leadership has nothing to do with seniority or one's position in the organization or in any company or in a hierarchy of companies.
Yeah,
It's not, it has nothing to do with titles.
Oh.
We can be leaders in our various homes, in churches, in our society without having any title. Leadership is not management, because managers manage things, but leaders lead people. Leadership is not, has nothing to do with personal attributes, because We don't need charismatic traits to practice leadership. Then what then is leadership? The use of self in leadership has numerous dimensions. Then how do you use self in leadership? That's the reason why we are here. We have lots and lots and lots to learn from our speakers today. So let us be patient to listen. Let's be calm so that we can gain as much as possible from our facilitators. So the program is in 2 sessions. Professor Jamieson we've used the first hour with Professor Jamieson, while the second hour will be used with Professor Mushibwe. So I would like to call on Professor Jamieson as he will be speaking on use of self in leadership. Let's become so that we can learn more and much from him. So Professor Jamieson, for us to be able to learn more from you during the question and answer period, I will be giving you 25 minutes, sir, to present your work to us. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Professor Jamieson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace and Justine. Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be asked to join my colleagues from other parts of the world where I've not had as much experience as you have had. And I'm very, very pleased to be working on what is sort of the next phase or the new frontier in my lifetime work. And that is about use of self in leadership. I was introduced to use of self when I was about 22 years old, because I was blessed to be at UCLA in California at the time when Bob Tannenbaum was still alive, and he was still the senior faculty in the OD Behavioral Science Department at UCLA, and it didn't take long for me to begin discovering the things that I did that got in my own way. And Bob was so insightful as a mentor and as an advisor to help anyone become their best self. And that was over 50 years ago, and I didn't do a lot of additional work other than on myself over all of that time. But about 10 or 15 years ago, I came back to the topic as a primary area for my research and writing. And the more I've done that, the deeper I've gotten into it, and the more I think now I understand it, along with Mian Chung Judge from Oxford, England, who has been my research partner in a lot of this work. So I'm very pleased to have this session today with you, and to begin to spread and support you in any way that I can. It's Bob. You know, Bob was one of the early people who talked about the importance of the person in the work we try to do in organization development, and his contemporaries were Charlie C.D. Seashore and E.D. Seashore, and they all knew each other. They were part of the original group of people that was the founding of NTL and very early work in OD. So he didn't write as much as others, but he taught thousands of students that went through both NTL programs and the UCLA doctoral program, and a few other programs around the country that used to train internal OD people. So, and he passed about 10 years ago, or a little more than 10 maybe. And I was blessed again to be with him in his last year. But what I want to talk about today, I will keep fairly simple and hopefully encourage other people to get as interested in this as I am. I want to be sure, do I have, let me see if I have ability to share my screen. Yes, I think I do. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So I will put this on slideshow from the beginning. Right. So as I begin to talk about this, most of the use of self work has been in the organization development field for forever. And there is not that much literature, by the way, because I've been studying it a long time, and I think you can find about 2 pages of citations that are kind of related and useful. But it has been talked about. It has been passed down. It has been shared by senior people to junior people for a very long time. But it still is a bit vague and fuzzy for a lot of people. So what do I do? Where do I start? Those kinds of things. Now, after doing the global research study that was mentioned earlier, that was captured from mostly OD people across 45 countries. It was we were very lucky. We had a study that had a lot of participants, and we learned a lot across cultures about use of self. But following that, I hope that'll continue to be part of the development of OD people. But I realized 2 things. Having been in this field so long, OD in many ways as a field has failed to connect strongly with organization leaders. And so we've become our own subgroup in some way, where we go to our conferences and we talk with each other. We're not still talking to the leaders, and we're not still training leaders so that they can understand different ways to work in leading organizations. And so about a year ago, I started to shift my own focus to exactly what we're going to talk about today. And this is an overview of that and how I want to keep developing it. So we're very new in this endeavor of trying to bring the concepts of use of self and the practicality of use of self into leaders who, for the most part, have never heard about it. And so let me go to the next stage. So what I'm going to say a little bit about is, how do I talk? What is use of self? What are we actually talking about? Then why is it important for leaders? That's the new connection we need to make. And I want to share with you a small study I did about how we learned some things from some very, very high performing, very, very successful leaders in an organization, and how we learned something about their natural understanding of use of self. None had ever heard about it, and we taught nobody about use of self in that little piece of research. And then some ways to begin developing one's use of self. And I want to talk to you as leaders, and also you as people who help with leader development. And so I'm going to target it as 2 populations. How do we help leaders get started in their own use of self? And how do we help in our leadership development work to maybe capture the interest of more leaders by including it in how we do the development work? And I want to share some practical first steps to get that started. So what do we mean when we talk about use of self for leaders? It's understanding our whole being. Now, that is a lifetime task. That is not what we learn in a weekend, but it's learning to understand who we are. And that means we have to understand the complexity and the comprehensiveness of each of us as a self. But then it's how we use ourselves in order to carry out the roles that we're in and what our intentions are. Our roles as a leader, our roles as a change agent, even our roles as a mother or father. And so we want to talk about how we carry out intentions, the importance of making choices. And I will mention that as we go through a model. Taking in what's present. In today's world, I imagine you're struck and concerned as much as I am with how things are today. It's very hard to be present when our minds are distracted everywhere, every day. So being in the present and being able to take in what is right around us is very critical to how we use ourselves. And then finally, and this is so powerful, we all know this one, learning from our experiences is how we improve our use of self. That becomes a link for using experiences to be able to ask ourselves questions. What else could I have done? How could I do that better next time? What happened when I was in that room? Those are the things that help us build our use of self. So the use of self is the core element in how effective we are in successfully executing an intended role. And here's what it's built on. So I've taught classes and courses for graduate students in use of self for about 10 years now. And I can tell you, I've introduced it to a lot of people who had zero idea what it meant when they came to the class. So here are the platforms we have to build. Our awareness of who we are. So our own self-understanding is very important. So all the work that's been done for years on self-help and self-assessment instruments and all that, that is a useful piece, but it is only a piece of how we get better at use of self. The next one is the clarity of our intentions. When we have a role and we go into a meeting at work, we have to think about what's my intention today in my role in this setting. So everything is contextualized. And nothing is the same every day and every week. So who's in this room? What is happening in our organization? What's the purpose of the meeting? But more importantly, whatever my role happens to be, what would be the most effective way for me to be behaving today in this situation? So that's all about clarity of intentions. The next is consciousness to the situations and our choices. Here's where our environment is beginning to create huge barriers for us. And that is when we cannot be present, then it means there's a lot about what's in our immediate surroundings that we don't take in. We miss it. We're blind to it. And when we don't take in good data about the situation we're in, that makes it harder for us to take the appropriate actions. It's that simple. And this starts when we're a kid, but it's really powerful when we're doing professional roles that impact other people. So consciousness to the situation is, again, that's a lifetime journey too. We don't get great at it. Every week, I am still struggling occasionally to be in a meeting or working with a client system and having my head quiet because I want to be present, and I still work hard. It's still not easy. And then managing ourselves purposely in our acting. In other words, we have choices in behaviors, and we have to then purposefully act in the proper way for that particular setting. Now, this is not about being fake or inauthentic. It's about understanding ourselves, understanding our role and intention, and then trying to act in a way that will be effective in the situation we're in. Because sometimes our being effective is when we stand up and challenge somebody. But you know what? Sometimes our best effectiveness is when we sit quietly and listen. So these are all action choices, and they're all part of use of self. So our self-understanding is critical, our intentionality, and developing our presence. Many of you have probably seen the work by Otto Scharmer on presence. He and others people have written just about presence, and that's a really good piece of understanding. and why some people are beginning to use mindfulness practices. And it's not that mindfulness practice is use of self, it's that it can help one in their use of self, because if it reduces your anxiety and if it quiets your mind, if that happens to work for you, then your ability to be present is better. Then we have choices. And you know what? The students I had, grad students, these are working people, adults. They sometimes would tell me truthfully that when they're in certain kinds of situations and certain emotions are triggered, they see no choices. They have a habitual behavior that is their reaction, but they don't see choices. And we used to do a lot of work with the students sometimes about how do you find choices and how do you look at a situation and pause just long enough to think about not doing what your mind is driving you to do immediately. Because our minds are all wired. Boy, they love repetition and the same thing. So if every time I'm triggered with a certain emotion, if this is my action, the mind loves that because the neural pathways just keep operating the same. But what we have to do if we want to manage some of our behavior, then we have to pause, just a brief pause, and think about what are my choices here? What are the possibilities I have here? And then we self-manage as best we can, meaning we manage some of our own emotions. This is where the emotional intelligence and all those work and instruments fits right in here, because it doesn't replace use of self. It enhances the possibility for us to understand and manage our emotions and other people's emotions better. That's what those tools actually do for us. And then learning from experiences. Every situation, every day is an action learning cycle. And I will show you that in just a minute. So let's say a word about the self first. This is all of us. So the self has a set of things that we can deal with. The personality factors, psychology has studied personality forever. So there's hundreds of personality instruments. And personality are core elements of who we are. Then there are traits, characteristics, and styles. Now, we develop these over time. We can change these over time. And again, a lot of our leadership tools are not personality assessments. They're assessments of traits, characteristics, and styles. Many of you have heard of the MBTI, and many of you have taken a leadership, like a transformational leadership assessment or something like that. Those are mostly stylistic, not personality. But they're both important. They're all part of who we are. And our attitudes come and go with life experiences. So we build attitudes, but our attitudes also help to drive our behavior. So, on a good day, you're happy and you're open to a lot of possibilities. And on a bad day, what do? Nah, I'm not going to try anything different today. I have to be very, very, very focused, and I have to do what I know how to do right now. So our attitudes and then our values grow from the time we're a child all the way through life experiences. So values are pretty well set when we're young, but it's showing up more and more that life experiences and especially traumas in life will allow people to shift some of their values. Identities are very important, and we're hearing more about identities nowadays. So there's gender and there's racial and there's culture. There's also professional identities. So when we decide to be an engineer or we decide to be an accountant, we are adding another identity into our mindset. And then lastly, our knowledge and skills. The thing we can control the most is what we study, what we learn, and how good we get at doing the things we want to do. So education is the other factor. So over our lifetime, when someone says, so who are you? Right? I'm going to answer when I'm 19, and I'm going to answer a different way when I'm 45, because I'm learning all about these things as best I can. The problem in our society and the problem with many leaders is they don't understand a lot of this about themselves, because that's not been the focus of their education or their careers. And so the self is where we have to deepen our understanding. Then we express ourselves through personas, and we always have hidden or unknown or denied selves that are in our shadow. So we always have personas that the world sees and shadows that they don't. So when we're presenting ourselves, we want to be as real and authentic as possible. But some people build intentional personas because you know what? They don't want to show up who they are. They want to show up as if they're somebody else. And the problem right now I see worldwide is social media is driving a lot of that fakeness. And so and social media is not where we're working necessarily, but people do the same thing in their social groups. They do the same things in their neighborhoods, and they do the same things at work. So we're human beings. And part of this is all learning more about what we know about human beings. So we have intentional and often habitual personas. And then we have shadows, and shadows tend to be out of our consciousness. And often they are denied parts of ourselves. That's where the psychologists have kind of clarified a lot about shadow. And so here's what happens. We grow up and we're told by those around us certain things that we don't do well or that we can't do. And that gets deeply embedded, and it becomes what we call a denied self. So part of that could be negative things, that is things we did that were angry and violent and painful to other people, and we don't want to own that, so we deny it. But we also have really wonderful strengths and skills that somebody kept telling us we weren't good at. And so a lot of times the individual doesn't believe that they're good at something because too many people have told them they weren't. And so where that gets pushed, it gets pushed into our subconscious. Now, it's still with us. It's still part of who we are. But since it's not in our consciousness, we may not be addressing it or thinking about it often. What happens in our lives is the shadow can be triggered. And it's usually an emotional trigger of some sort. And when it's triggered, we sometimes act in what someone would call we act out of character. Because we act a little differently than we normally do. Or we surprise the people around us with some behavior. And we can't be angry or mad about that. It is something that's been in us, but it has not been very obvious or shared with anyone else. And we could be embarrassed by it, or we could be surprised by it, because we were put in charge of a meeting, and we've always said we're not a very good leader, and boom, we did a great job, and a whole bunch of people said that was wonderful. How'd you ever do that? And so the shadow isn't good or bad, but it is part of ourselves that we've made subconscious. Every situation, system, or encounter we enter is a new opportunity to be yourself. This is the saving grace of use of self. You can have had a bad week last week, and next week could be your best week. Every meeting, every encounter, every one-to-one conversation, you have opportunities to choose different behaviors. And that is what managing use of self kind of means. Now, if it was simple, we'd have a 3-step process. But the human being is a bit more complex than that. And the situations that we now find ourselves in is even more complex and difficult. So we just have to work a little bit more at how we show up and what we choose to do. So here's the action learning cycle for use of self. Remember, every situation is a new opportunity. So we move into a situation, and the things we need to do is be able to see what's going on. And that's not just our eyesight. Seeing is about how we take in data using all of our senses. How can we take in data from the present situation? Number 2 is, are we clear about our intention? Why are we there? If our role is HR, that doesn't mean I have to speak and act the same way every time I go anywhere. It means, what is my best role in this situation? Then we make sense of what we've taken in. What do we think has gone on here? Now, making sense draws on all of our knowledge and our experiences. We blend our knowledge and experiences when we're making sense of things. And so I call that know. So we have the C competency, and then we have the know competency. How do we put it together? And this is all being done, by the way, rather quickly, because it's practice that gets us better at this. And so with practice, it becomes internalized, and it becomes more seamless in the sense that I'm taking in, I'm clear about my intention, and I'm making sense on a relatively rapid basis. Then right in here between sense making and action is where our looking at choices is critical. And so many people don't see choices that they make a quick understanding of what they think is going on and immediately are in action, rather than that tiny pause that says, what are my behavioral choices? What are my behavioral choices? That is what gives us freedom, folks. When we have some choice, we have some freedom. And then we act. And once we've acted, things happen. Other people have been impacted, and other people have narratives about what they think happened. And you have taken action, and you have narratives about what you think happened. And then the next important thing is reflection. And all of the latest neuroscience stuff is helping us here a lot, because without reflection, experiences may never become embedded learning. Internalized learning occurs through the reflection process. And so when we have 15 different experiences a day, but we've not had reflection on any of them, they will be fleeting experiences. They may not become a part of our learning. And so that's another important aspect of this. Let me see if I can move. So let me get to the leaders real quickly here. Why do I think this is really important for leaders? Well, we've been working with use of self for change agents for decades. And we've seen the difference between people who can operate well with the client system, people who can move in and out of the culture of the of an organization system, and also different ways that they can make behavioral choices and act differently and choose an intervention or something to say at the right time. So the more we develop change agents that way, now I'm thinking about leaders. So here's what we have with leaders. They have 10 times the power. They have way higher responsibility in the workplace. They impact many, many more people than most of us change agents ever do. And so they're impacting people on a daily basis, positively and negatively, right? And then they are very high influence in both their words and behaviors. So they
try to round up, Prof.
Say that again.
I want you to round up. Round your work up. Round up, be faster.
Okay.
Be faster, because I will soon stop you.
Oh, okay. The point I'm trying to make is that whatever they do, their words and their behaviors carry very strong influences. Some people because they're followers, and some people because they're rejectors. And so therefore, the behavior and words of the leader are always triggering positive responses or negative responses in other people. And then they are always a role model, because while you can do your work sometimes in a workplace and not everybody sees it or knows what you do and how it worked and all that, for leaders, they're almost always on a stage somewhere. People are watching, people are learning, and so they become a rather good or not so good role model. So as they take action, There are multiple continuous impacts on others and the system, because leaders also are very powerful in formulating and sustaining the cultures and the way the place works. So what did we learn from some very good leaders? We had a small group of people at a company that is ranked in all those lists where they talk about best places to work and all those things. This company happened to fall into that category. And I knew the HR person there, and what they did is they took all the data. They use a ton of data. So they took a lot of data and they found leaders they had team scores, and their teams had very high team engagement, very high commitment, and very high well-being outcomes. So in other words, metrics that the organization was looking at, the leaders who were pulled out of that were ones who had teams with very high scores. So they knew nothing about use of self. They've never had training on use of self. And what we did was we randomly selected and asked people to volunteer. I mean, we picked people and they asked them to volunteer. Would they mind participating in a short interview? So myself and one of my former doc students, we went out and visited maybe 3 or 4 times to this business. And each time we got to interview 4 or 5 of these leaders. And they led everything from IT to manufacturing they were leaders all across the place. And so what we were trying to do is we were trying to use a qualitative set of questions to learn, how did these leaders think about their leadership tasks? How did they do things and how did they process things? So we asked very generalized open questions, and there was only about 10 of them. So we were each there, we each had notes. So all the good things about qualitative, we had 2 different people interpreting it and creating themes. Then we integrated our themes and made some modifications to what we called them. And here's what was fascinating about this little study. This is what those leaders told us about themselves. They all had said in different ways that they work very hard to understand themselves, and especially in their leader role. They all told us in various ways that they were intentionally concerned with their presence, with their ability to be in presence with the people they worked with their team players, and they talked about it in a variety of different ways. And this is the resulting of our theming. Then they all talked about critical decisions and critical actions. They spoke to it in a way that we ended up calling mindful, meaning they thought a lot about how they were going to have a difficult conversation, or they thought a lot about when they needed to do something with an employee that was not doing well. And they didn't just do the act, they spent time mindfully thinking it through. And almost all of them in this particular category, almost all of them spoke to the fact that I'm concerned about the performance of our team and our company, and I'm also very concerned about the human beings involved. They were telling us this with no prompts. And then finally, reflective practice for learning. They all had a way.
Prof, and you have 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes, sir.
Okay. They all had reflective practices of how they learned things, meaning some did it on their drive to work, some did it while they were at home, some found a little private, quiet time every single day, and they had a way to do it, but they would do some form of a reflective practice. And I thought that was nice to just come out naturally, because all 4 of those things are now in the research we've done, and they're now in the way in which we teach use of self. So what kind of development do we need? I'll highlight this. The leader themselves have to understand that it takes 2 to see 1. None of us will ever fully understand ourselves without feedback. It takes two to see one. An honest self-assessment is usually missing. That is, we don't tell ourselves the truth about ourselves sometimes. So I like to work with leaders where I get them to work on writing down their own self-assessment of their strengths and their weaknesses and the areas that they wish could be done better. People need to figure out ways to enhance consciousness and presence. They need to identify when they're not present. They need to identify when they're missing things. Choices are very important, and most people need a little bit of help to pause enough to see choices. And then the other one is to see the purpose of their role as being in service of others. And sometimes we forget this. I've seen change agents do the same thing. They forget they're in service of others. So the practical first steps are find a self-development partner. Very important. We can't do this alone. It never works completely alone. You write your own self-assessment. Then you select a few people around you, usually a peer, maybe someone higher level, maybe someone lower level, and you select based on your own self-assessment. You pick areas you want feedback in. So this is not waiting for chance. This is going after people who see you in action and can give you some valid feedback. And then you identify one or two things that you find is not working as well as you want, or it produces anxiety for you. And you plan with your partner, what are some things I can try? So I try out different ways to handle those situations. The last piece is for leadership development professionals. For those of us who are trying to build leaders, we need to introduce use of self into the programs, because a lot of the programs have self-awareness, but use of self is the element that will combine self-awareness with action taking. A lot of self-awareness work is never connected to changing behavior, and that's what we want use of self to do. And then creating peer coaching or partners, people who will work together in the leadership development work. And then finally, putting leadership development people into teams that do actual work together, because doing the work together will show up their use of self better than anything we could simulate. And so then after the action teamwork happens, what we do is we facilitate a use of self feedback discussion. Because if we can build that into leadership development in a safe environment, we can get a lot of people accelerated on understanding how they're showing up and what they're doing. So I'll leave this in the slides, but the whole idea of learning how to find your best self is important, and it means each of these elements that I said become part of use of self. We need to develop in each one of those. I think two things that I've found are very critical is the ability to have short pauses that allow our mind to think how to override habitual behavior. I think that's a very big piece. And the second one I call noticing. You all know that when you go into a group or somebody watches a crime happening, everybody's story about it is different, because we take in very different data. So the noticing is something people can work on and people can practice. And I think that helps a lot. So if there are questions.
Wow. Thank you, Prof, for that educative and thought-provoking presentation.
Thank you.
He has talked about what use of self is. And he reiterated it is built on our awareness of who we are. He said, use of self is clarity of our intentions, consciousness of the situations and our choices, and managing ourselves purposely in acting. He described how personality factors, traits, characteristics, and styles define self. And that any position you find yourself is a new opportunity to be yourself.
Yes.
We also talked about why use of self is important for leaders as something that makes you to be highly responsible, enables you to impact many people, and be able to serve as a role model. He highlighted in his presentation what we learned from best leaders and various ways to developing one's use of self. He also taught practical first steps for individual leaders and leadership development professionals. Finally, he talked about finding your best self by paying attention to serve others' context interactions and patterns across situations and many others. Prof, thank you once again for that thought-provoking presentation. So the floor is now open to us. We want your questions, comments, and whatever. Please, I want us to be as brief as possible in the way we ask our questions. Yes. Let's go straight to the point, and let's take advantage of Prof before the time is up. Thank you. God bless you.
I see a hand up from Dr. Cornell. Those who want to speak, can you please show by raising your hands in the chat box or put your comments in the chat box so that we know how many people want to contribute and to ask questions. Thank you. Dr. Cornell.
Hi, Dr. Cornell.
Good afternoon to all the learned participants or attendees and all the colleagues from across the globe, if I can say that. Thank you very much, Professor Jamieson. It's Professor, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you so much for this profound discussion. I sat here and I'm on the nice side of 50, if you understand what I mean. And I feel like I'm a student again because I sat here and I was hardly breathing. I was like hanging on to every word you were saying because suddenly a lot of things has started to make sense for me about the way that people behave. If I think about myself 20 years ago versus where I'm now, I'm doing things differently, and I'm now understanding after listening to you why I am doing things the way that I am. I just have one question. I don't want to go on. Grace asked us nicely not to go into a whole tirade. When you, and I've seen it under COVID now, I have to do this, where that in the beginning you spoke about that hidden self, the part of you that you're not fully aware of, but under certain circumstances, you just suddenly, it comes out. And I think under COVID, a lot of us were in situations where you are homebound, you don't go to the office, but you still have that stress of working and looking after your family, and people are in each other's space, etc. How do you know when, or how do you identify the triggers for this to come out, this hidden self? And I'm talking about the one that you said where you suddenly behave out of character. How does one identify the triggers for that, not only in yourself, but in other people?
Well, mostly it's you gather it through experiences, but think about it as, when are you emotionally triggered and what are the emotions about? So one would be fear, one would be vulnerability, one even might be anger. And so you're listening to somebody else, or you're in a situation where this trigger occurs, and it's connected to a specific emotion usually. And the reason it's in our shadow is probably because that emotion was what was real somewhere in your past, and it was related to whatever's happening in this situation. So it's a little bit of a puzzle, and it's very customized. Yours are different than mine. So we have to kind of figure some of those out. And then when we know those things, we are better off managing our own behavior. We have more choices again. So,
Thank you very much. And thanks again for inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Professor, Prof, sir. Prof, sir. There is a question. There is a question that says, how do we manage the experience of feeling disappointed in one, maybe as a result of some expectations unmet? How do you manage that?
How do we, are you
How
saying,
do-
how do we manage the experience of feeling disappointed in one, maybe as a result of some expectations? Yes, okay.
unmet?
If we're feeling disappointed in them, we need to understand their experience, and they may or may not be feeling disappointed in themselves. So my feeling of disappointment is actually feedback data that I can share with them. And they may not have the same experience that they're feeling. So, so it always takes two to see what's going on with one. So my feedback can help that person maybe think through what their experience is and realize that the impact on me was that I was disappointed in them. I thought they weren't reaching my expectations. But remember, they may not have had that in their head. And so until they hear it from me, then that's new information potentially for them. So yes, that's one of those things that we have to do. And it would be similar if we're in a relationship where we care and support each other, and we often hold back rather than share feedback in a trusting and supportive way. I mean, I'm not trying to hurt someone. I'm trying to tell you how your behavior actually impacted me. That's really all I can tell you, because I can never tell you if it's right or wrong. So it's the use of good feedback. Yeah.
Okay. Prof, how best do we help our mentees optimize the use of self under a mentorship platform by proxy, which provides less and or near impossible medium to see each other? How do we help our mentees?
Help our mentees optimize the
use of self.
Yes. Okay. Wow. What, under a mentorship platform? So you're not actually interacting with them in person, I take it. And this is one of the things we miss when we're living virtually and not having anything in person. There's data we get when we're in person that you can't get virtually. We get a little bit of body language virtually, but we do not get the whole of body language. So we know that words are only a portion of the meaning that we get when people are talking to us in person, because the nonverbals are very critical. And what I find virtually now is most people have become less animated on the screen. And therefore there is less data being exchanged between us. And so, yes, I think doing some things only virtually is going to be a difficult way for people. Now, we can share a lot of feedback and tie it to specific situations. That can still be helpful to people in understanding themselves better. The value of valid feedback has never lost its importance since Kurt Lewin and others did it, 70 years ago. And yet we shy away from it. And we have a lot of people who give feedback that is useless and that is just their form of criticizing somebody. And that's not what we mean. And that
say that these theories are not valid would also give clear arguments that why these theories are not valid. Explain what you are saying. Yeah.
Let's see.
Hello.
I didn't hear that question. It didn't come through very clearly, but
Please speak louder.
It's fine.
You can speak louder and clearer for us to hear the question, please.
I don't think it was a question. You can go ahead, Prof. Jamieson. You can go ahead. It was not a question.
Wow.
Yeah.
okay. Okay, were there any other questions? I don't want to take more time than because we have other people who are going to be speaking. But
Mo, kí ló ṣẹlẹ̀? Onísanwó.
Who is this?
Okay, it's fine.
yeah, I love this last question. Dr. Cornell said that, you know, I thought I knew myself, but now I realize I still have a lot of work to do. Well, I mean, I'm not a youngin' anymore, and I'm still working on it. I'll tell you that. And I was introduced to it very young. And you go through life experiences. And again, if you weren't taking time to reflect, there's a lot of learning that went away in the clouds. And I know that that's how I lived my life when I working 60 hours a week, being very busy and all that. I was not taking time to pause and take in reflection. And now I know that that's better. So no matter what, even if I have to stay up an extra hour at night, I'm going to review a lot of stuff that happened today. And that's keeping me on target a lot better than when I was 20 or when I was 40, you know. So yeah, there's but don't get anxiety about it either. It's a movie. We're in our own movie. You start anywhere you can and you keep improving the understanding and the noticing and the ability to reflect. And before you know it, your cycle of learning and improving yourself keeps growing. And I think that's our secret for how to do this now, because everybody does have to do some work on it. It doesn't just happen. And we can't give somebody a certification in use of self. It's a journey, that's all. So.
Yes, just a quick comment. Thank you so much, Dev, for that.
Yes.
And we do have a reflection that we do every month as a community. We encourage members to do reflective practice.
Good.
As part of enhancing consciousness, because as you have indicated earlier, social media is taking a lot of people's time today.
Yes.
And as such, reflecting on yourself is of paramount importance. We have a lot of experiences every day, but I think only a few of us reflect on those experiences every day. So it's important to do that that reflection in that respect. And I see questions on the recording. I confirm the recording will be shared soon after this particular session.
Yeah, that it would be great to have. I appreciate it. And I give all my best regards to all of your community and my colleagues in this field around the world.
Prof,
Thank you.
I want to ask a question. From what Dr. Justin just said, how do you take advantage of the social media to develop yourself, to develop self in leadership?
Well, I don't have a high regard for things I've seen on social media, and I don't belong to very many social media outlets because I don't know exactly what to trust, and I would never want to use it for feedback because feedback needs to come from trusted advisors who see us in action. That's the feedback that I care about. And I think there's a lot of posturing and stuff like that involved on social media. Then the positive side is I do use LinkedIn, and I think wonderful things get shared through LinkedIn, but I don't know what happens on all the other apps. But I'm not sure it's the way. Use at least one other person. That's the partnership that really helps, gets you moving from your perception of self to your perception plus at least some additional input. And then if you can go wider than one partner, you get more input. And you just say, I'm happy with who I am, and this is where I'm starting, and I'd like to get better. You don't have to put yourself down in any way. So, because boy, I've made most of the mistakes one can make. So, you know, and you learn from them over time. So, and then we have all kinds of our students who have started this process. Many are finished their degree 4 or 5 years ago. They're still avidly working on their use of self journey, because some people got it. And once they got it, it has an addiction in the sense that I know I can be better. I know I'm not my best self. So I work on it. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
On
Thank
the
you
last
very much.
note, before we end your session, sir, there's a saying that says, how you act as a leader determines how you are perceived by others. And how you are perceived by others determines how much trust, cooperation, and respect you receive. Do we act as a leader? Is it possible for us to act?
Yes, yes. Every change agent has leadership work to do. And part of it is I've never been in a change project where I didn't also have to coach the leader. And because leaders are not masterful or experts at doing change, nothing in their education helps them do change. So if you are helping a leader through change, there's always going to be times when, as a change agent, you need to be in a coaching role with them. Not all leaders are open to that, and not all leaders are open to help. So part of the problem is, if you and the leader can't be in a fight, you have to find a way to have a trusting, open relationship. Ed Shine's most recent work is all about that: humble consulting and humble leadership. It's about having the right kind of relationship to do the work. But the other thing about that, I think, that's important is with leaders, one of the things that I've noticed is, since leaders are very unaware, they're not unaware of all of who they are. They're unaware of their impact on the system and the people, because they never ask those questions. I'm sure a lot of them don't want to know the answer. So part of what we need to do to bring leaders into use of self is just make it okay for them, and for them to have a trusted partner who might be another leader, who's there to help them see things that they're a little blind to, or they're just not aware of, and everything we can do to do that. So I think we can do more of it through leadership development. I know we can do more of it in coaching leaders. When I was coaching leaders, I was bringing questions about their own self into the conversation. Because if you've ever seen this, when something goes wrong and something's not working well, and the leader's struggling with doing his or her job well, they never look at themselves. They always look at others and the context they're in to find fault or find blame. And if we just get them to start with some questions about, what did I do in this situation? Or how did my behavior influence what happened here? Just looking inside and outside is the way we do a better job of both solving the problem, but also growing as a person. That's where I see us. I hope we can do more of that. Anyway.
Prof, I want to appreciate you once again for your time, and I hope everyone has benefited a lot from Prof's presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
God bless you. Have a wonderful time. Bye.
Yes, thank you too. I appreciate that. I'll stop the share. Yep. And I wish you all well, and hope to be connected with you all again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Justin?
Thank you. Yes.
So, I think
No, it's over to you. It's over to you. Thank you so much, Dave, for the time. In case you might need to leave early, it's fine. Maybe you might have 1 minute, last words. Probably you might need to leave early. I understand you have another session later on.
And I will see you in a little while at the OLDN awards ceremony.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah.
Cheers.
The next facilitator is Dr. and Professor Mrs. Christine Phiri Mushibwe. Prof, are you around? She's the vice.
I am.
So thank you. She's the Vice Chancellor of Unical University of Zambia. She'll be taking us through the conflicting phases of leadership. The first day I heard about the title of today's conversation as use of self in leadership. I was saying there should be misuse of self in leadership too. So I think Prof will be taking us through the conflicting phases of leadership. So for your presentation, Ma, you have 25 minutes to present for us to have enough time for our discussion. You are welcome, madam.
Thank you.
Your time starts.
Thank you. I need to share my PowerPoint presentation. So I need to go to share.
Oh my God, did you not do anything? Jesus fucking Christ, son.
Can everybody see my slides?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So as introduced, Dr. Christine Phiri Mushibwe, and currently the Vice Chancellor of UNICAF University, Lusaka. And Lusaka is in Zambia. Now, I will not go into the nitty-gritties of who I am and what I've done, but a bit of what I'm actually into is leadership, really, and the kind of leadership that is self-oriented or grounded in self. And so I like to follow Liz Ryan and Bridget Haysens. I'm sure Dave will agree with me, I think, about their writings as they've submitted them also on LinkedIn, the only social media that a professor says he's actually into. And then the other thing I would like to confess is that when I read that Dave was going to be the main presenter, I really felt like a dwarf. And so it has really been a privilege to sit in and to hear what Dave was able to say, because what I'm saying is completely grounded in what he's been able to present. I just hope that from the title that I have here, the conflicting character of leadership, that it will not be a conflicting presentation of what Professor has been able to present. And so I will look at those issues that I've stipulated there under the structure. And in introduction, I'm just going to say that leadership is a process of leading. Things that a lot of people have written about, and a lot of books in human resource management, ODL, actually write about that leadership is a process of leading. And individuals take this position of leadership. But there's something that we also need to be aware of here, that there is the personality. And I'll speak a bit later on personality, because current literature is also indicating that there is no personality, but what is there is the self. And so there's also the part of character. And character, we need to know that it is a determinant of an individual's self, which is the personality. So leadership without character is problematic and reason for most issues in leadership, most of the issues that a professor has already been able to raise here. So I'm looking at scandals, for instance, misappropriation, of a number of things, fraudulent activities and scrupulousness. And you get to see that a number of leaders that have got flawed character, you are looking at their self. There is a problem there. And a number of leaders that we have currently in the world, we can actually be able to see some of the issues that we are going to raise here. Okay, so I'm saying that self, which is something that is supposed to be, others will say it is objective, others will say that it is subjective. This is the me, myself, and I. It initiates action. Professor has been able to indicate that. And it's an ongoing social construction because society is impacting on the self. And it's a collection of self, the self-understanding and awareness, the self-biases, and the other views and the attitude that we have already been told about. And there is the issues to do with intentions, choices, presence, and self-management, which has nicely been elaborated by Professor. And so when we come to self there, which number of writers have indicated that it is more on the general, it is an internal propensity, you know, a product of one's personality and a collection of stable predispositions. And if you look at that, you find that what really stands out is the self. And that is why we are advocating for self in leadership. And so if you come down there, you have the behavior. Just a minute. Okay. Okay.
Dr.
We have the
Christine,
behavior.
we are getting a bit of an echo. Are you using two laptops there? We have an
No. I've only got one laptop.
Okay, that's fine then. You can proceed.
I think this is sound from Sasha.
Please, let's mute our mics, please. Except the speaker.
Is that okay?
Yes. Now it's
all right.
fine.
And so we now find ourselves there where there's the behavior, what you do, and the character as to who you are. So the character then looks at the issues to do with morals, the ethics, and the values. And in terms of the qualities of that particular person, what we need to know is that the character influences the behavior. So it influences what you actually do. How one acts in line with the character or not, that is a role played. And then it also impacts, that's the behavior, it also impacts on the character. So how one manages or carries oneself. So you can see that that is something that is very, very important. And if we are followed from what Professor has indicated, this is something that is of importance. Now the character, there are two definitions of character that I give here. One in form of a role in a play or a movie. That one assumes it may not be real, and hence the character that you are seeing on my screen of a man in a mask. And if you look behind that mask, you find this man is actually not even happy. It may be a woman, it may be a man. So sometimes you've got certain characters. If you follow movie actors, you might find that probably the role that you have been given might not be the best role that you would want to play, but you still have to play it and you have to make it real, when in the actual sense that is not your true character. It also, I also look at that lead character speaks of the person of an individual that determines his nature. It is not played. It is the genuine representation of that particular individual, the true self. Unfortunately, a played role character has its own problems that may conflict with the human expectation. So one acts as a leader, devoid the self. And so you might find, because they are stipulated roles that are expected of that particular role that one has to play, and probably gets caught up in the autopilot, ceases to listen. The awareness part of it is not there. The presence might be there, but consciously he may not even be there, or notices and lack of practicality altogether. And then self can conflict with that particular character through self-doubts, moral dilemmas, or one's own nature. So I'm looking at those four aspects of character. They expected the genuine, which could be considered as the original, although there could be some difference in terms of definition there. Then the authentic character, and as well as the counterfeit. Now I'm putting two figures in between there just to make sure that I'm gender sensitive, that I'm not only talking about the man, but I'm also talking about the woman. So here I introduce these four characters, which I've already noted from there. So these are crucial to the success of the leader in any organization, institution, or establishment. Why am I saying so? Because why and what really are they? Simply, you can see those explanations, like original being real, unadulterated, or unmodified. Authenticity representing one's true nature or beliefs, true to oneself or to the person identified, which is grounded in self. Counterfeit, which is imitating something authentic, it can replace the original. The expected, this is believed to be the thing, the action believed to be. So what are you expected to do as a leader? How are you expected to carry yourself as a leader? So I came up with that model, and this model, I've tested it on about 10 leaders in different organizations. And of the 10 that I was testing this model on, 8 of them fitted into the first route of the model, and 2 of them were able to express themselves in terms of the second route. So you see there self, the 3 arrows there are actually speaking about the intensity that we get from society in shaping who we really are. So we have the original person there, but this person is actually being impacted upon by society, the self, the reflexive self, the social identities. I'm sure Professor has already talked about the identity part of it. And so there is the expectation there. What is society expecting a leader to be? What is society expecting a leader to behave like? Now, that route, the first route there, which will end into a counterfeit, character plays a role, you find that there's a divergent there. So we could have, and that is what normally happens, is that people that will follow into the expectant role, they could also go to the authentic leadership. And I'll explain that further. And then down there, you've also got the expectation that is played by this authentic leader. So the dominance of leadership is engulfed in character. And so what am I really saying here? I hope I don't confuse you, is that the model posits that the original represents the unadulterated, unmodified character. Then the original character can be affected by society, interested individuals, etc. For example, Aristotle is the originator of the need for government of laws, not men. Sorry, there's me there. So Aristotle was able to say that we need to have a government of laws, not a government of men. So what we now have is, it is more to do with the rules, the laws, the policies, what is expected of this leader to be like. To an extent, it is good, but to a larger extent, you find that it can even be devoid of the self. So there's the leadership styles, for instance, the democratic leader who has to play by the rules of a democratic leader. You've got the dictator who also has to play by the rules of the dictator. You have different types of leadership. And you find if someone comes up and says, I am a democratic leader, the expectation of society is what it has framed is that that leader is supposed to act democratic. The principles and the laws and the rules that govern a democratic leader are supposed to be followed. Now, here is one whose character may not be, but probably because that is the kind of a job he has applied for. So a mask is put on and he enters into that particular job role and begins to play the role. That, if you follow the first route, you might find that if someone ends there and does not realize that he needs to be himself, may end up now being a counterfeit leader. So that's why we have issues to do with who will lead, what leaders do. what functions they serve, how different they are supposed to be from non-leaders, and the kind of leaders and what results they produce. So we might find that someone is saying democratic leaders produce the best results. And if that person is not producing the best results, people will say, no, 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 he's not the kind of leader we were expecting because of the expectations of society and probably that particular industry or organization someone is in. Then we also have trainings where you find there is a transformational training. So leaders who feel or sense that they're transformational leaders will go to this transformational training, and then they begin to know, oh, so as a transformational leader, this is how I'm supposed to be acting. And whilst it's good, but if this person is only fitting into that puzzle, then the problem that comes in is that that person may not be able to be a self-leader. So route 1, the 3 arrows, like I've already indicated, I'm not going to repeat that, but I'll go straight to route 2. Since the 1 arrow represents how uncommon this route might be. And like I have said in my research, only 2 were able to identify themselves under that route. However, potential is there to have an unadulterated individual emerging with a character that is authentic. So man acquires a particular quality by constantly acting in a particular way, so said Aristotle. And the most important thing is what Professor was able to say about reflecting. And the reason for not reflecting is one reason why people end up playing a role, because they are not reflecting on how their words are impacting in the people that they are leading. Their actions are impacting on the people that they are leading. So the unadulterated and modified character is made to fit into the expected role. Society already has their own expectation of what a leader should be and how they should act or even conduct themselves, like I have indicated. So the norms, the societal norms. Fitting into the role is like putting on a mask. The leader assumes his or her position and begins to play that role. The result, like I indicated, is a counterfeit leader. Something that looks like a leader, but is not a leader. He's there and he's been given a role. So the majority of leaders fall into this category. Now and again, their true character slips out and their true self is glimpsed. And who are disappointed? The people who might have believed that that person is supposed to be the leader, because then they begin to see what is not supposed to be of a leader because the expectation does not spell out that. One example which I'm going to dwell upon is that of Trump, for instance. Those from USA may excuse me on that one, but I'm going to give that as an excuse, as an example. An expectation, there is an opportunity for one's character to stand out, and hence the arrow leading to authentic. Those 2 arrows that are leading to the authentic leader, because that now is an opportunity for one who gets into this leadership role and begins to reflect on himself and his awareness, the impact of his behavior, the impact of his words. Then he begins, as he reflects on that, he begins to move on from the expected to the authentic. Yes, the job description would still be there, but the real self of that particular individual should still be able to emerge. So a counterfeit character is likely to be born that is under route 1. One begins to live and act what they are not. Imitate leading, and self is not there. The man behind, like I have indicated, is a sad man, because probably he is just leading for the sake of leading, unable to be himself. The conflict can get to a point of just becoming. So I'll not repeat the route 2 because I've been able to explain that, but I'll move on to those examples that I have given. So one of them is Trump and Obama. And I might shock you if I tell you that Trump is an authentic leader, because Trump has sort of like not taken upon the expectation of society. The expectation of society, which explains that the American president is supposed to act in this way, the American president is supposed to act in this way, the American president is supposed to act in this way. Trump has done the complete opposite. But that is himself. He's acting as himself, and you should be able to begin to see the conflicting characters of leadership. And that is where it all came from, because here is an authentic leader, but there is a conflict with the expected, because the expected has got its own roles, its own rules, and its own ways of doing things. And if you look at Obama, he sort of like fitted into the role very, very well. And he became a proper, authentic leader, because the self was acting. In the case of Trump, the self was not there because he doesn't mind how people feel. The conscious is not there. So you see that conflict. I hope I'm able to bring that nicely out to you. Then you've got Nelson Mandela, and you've also got Winnie Mandela. You know, everybody would have expected, when Mandela came out of prison, they would have expected, all right, okay, he's got a lot of enemies, and he's going to make sure that these enemies now are going to pay for what they did to himself and probably the citizens of South Africa. But Nelson Mandela was not like that. And now Nelson Mandela stands out because his character came out, his self came out. He looked at those people who may have treated him in a wrong way, and probably the way they treated the South Africans. He came out and was himself and was able to forgive. And you see a different character with Winnie Mandela. Then look at the late Princess Diana. Princess Diana acted herself. Authentically, she acted herself, was able to deal with human beings. The best one which comes out is where she goes to this organization and lifts a person that was HIV positive and put them on her lap. And people were surprised because that is real, that is human. This is where the conscious is in place. The awareness is in place. Her presence was able to impact a lot of people. Then there's Meghan and Prince William. I'm sure Harry and Meghan were able to see what has happened because they've come out now from the royal establishment and said, we are going to play our own role, because they've seen that the acting part of it is not working out. You've got William and Kate who are there because they're sort of like fitted in and they can wave, you know, the kind of wave which is not normal for a person to use. But because it is expected of the monarch to act in that way, that has actually to happen. Then you've got the pastors. I'm sure you've been following what has also been going on about the pastors in Africa, where we are expecting them to be moral people, but then you begin to see the opposite of these pastors, and you're wondering, why are they acting like that? Because it's no longer the self. That is something that is hidden. They may not even be leaders, but they might just be there because they are acting, they are wanting to get something out of it all. And who suffers? It is the people or the followers that are being led. And so what am I really saying here? So I'm saying that you've got playing the leadership role. Some people can even be natural born leaders. Playing the leadership role, it can be an inherited or born into that particular role, like the monarch. Playing the leadership role can also be adopted leaders, these who are taught leadership and then they go into an organization. Currently, I know that people who are not even Christians are able to go into university and learn, do theology, and then they go and pastor a church. They are actually atheists, but because it is what they have been trained into, so they go into a church, have nothing to do with God, but they are playing leadership. They have been adapted into leadership because they were taught. Then you've got the counterfeit one. So you see the conflicting faces of leadership. Don't forget the model that we went through earlier. And so authentic leaders should be able to demonstrate empathy, to understand other people deeply, intuition, the ability to perceive things with their minds, creative, you know, able to connect things and experiences, synthesize new things. And the one thing that I should have also been able to add there is the reflection part of it. Then there's the passion, an intense desire to do something or for something, because they know that employees are human. They know that employees have independence. They have a self-will. Employees should not be manipulated forever, and employees can actually leave at one time or not. So you see that there is a conflicting character of leadership. And it is very, very important that a leader is authentic. Yes, the leader may take the second route, but it can also actually happen very well because there is no one who is not impacted upon by society. And I believe that that is the best route because you know what you are dealing with, the individuals and how they're able to impact upon you. But through reflection, through understanding, through the consciousness, you are able to see that the people that are being led are not machines. We are no longer in the Frederick Taylor or the mechanistic theories stage. Whilst there are a few things that we may pick out of that, but emotional intelligence should also be able to come out because just as self as you are as a leader, then you'll be able to understand that the employees that are being led are also individual selves that will need to be treated correctly. And so they are our employees. I remember when I became a leader as a deputy head teacher in one school, the head teacher was not very happy with me because I was entertaining the employees in my office to a point that when I went away somewhere on duty, I asked one of the senior members of staff to come and use my office and sit on the chair. But when I came back from my assignment, I was actually told off and told that my office was supposed to be kept sacred. As a leader, nobody should be able to come there. People should fear my office. And I don't think that is real because as a human being, and as the self begins to come out, you realize that the people you are leading are individual human beings who also have a self. And so we need to be self-aware and begin to reflect on our characters and how our character can actually be able to impact and destroy others. And I was also thinking about the element of mentoring and coaching. And like Professor was able to indicate that, you see, at the moment we've got social media that has taken also the role of mentoring people and coaching people. Now, the problem is the element of awareness. We are actually not aware that some of the words we use even on social media may impact negatively on others. And it's not everybody, but others may be impacted positively. So that's why we really need to be very, very careful because the presence, the physical presence is missing. And like Professor has indicated, you may not see the expressions of an individual. You may not see probably the actions of that particular individual who has posted something on social media. So the coaching part of it and the mentoring part of it becomes quite problematic because it's also difficult to see whether that person who is mentoring you on social media is a self-leader who actually values self and that their character is good, because their character might actually be rotten. A number of people have ended up spreading what is not right. And at this particular point, I'll go back. I'll ask the moderator to come back as I am now on my last slide.
Prof, thank you so much for your presentation. It has been so exciting and very timely. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She introduced the presentation by defining leadership as a process of leading, and that individuals taking the position of leadership have a personality and have a character. And that character is a determinant of an individual's personality. She also reiterated that leadership without character is problematic and reason for most of these issues in leadership. She discussed how character and behavior impact and influence each other. She gave 2 definitions of character and also 4 types of character as being genuine, counterfeit, expected, and authentic. She highlighted what is meant by flawed character. She also talked about character and 2 phases of character, model, and conflicting traces of leadership. She compared various types of leadership style by comparing Trump and Obama, Nelson Mandela and Winnie Mandela, Princess Diana, Prince Henry and Meghan, Prince William and Kate, and all our pastors that don't behave the way we expect them to behave. So she said those acting she mentioned various examples of those acting in the opposite way of expectation. Then she also said there are authentic leaders, counterfeit leaders, adapted leaders, inherited leaders, and natural leaders. So, and that leaders should show empathy, intuition, they should be creative and synthesize new things, and to have passion as leaders. And so that takes us to the end of our presentation. So we welcome questions, comments from the participants. Thank you, Madam, once again. We gain a lot from the presentation. Thank you, thank you. So
yes, I see Dr. Dotun's hand is up. Dr. Dotun.
Yes, good evening, sir. Good evening, doctor. Sorry. Good evening, Dr. Christie. Thank you. Thank you very much for such insightful. If I got to a point, I was confused because I have a lot of questions, but because of time, I'll just narrow it down. But allow me to quickly give you a scenario of our current experience in my country, Nigeria precisely. I want to be honest and to inform you that virtually there has never been any governor, past or present, upon coming to power and upon leaving power, we have different experiences about their identity. I must tell you that even the current president, when he was coming, we had a lot of expectations, but we are confused because we are not seeing the bottom lines in the economy. Poverty is on the rise, terrorism is on the rise, and quite a number of chaos and on the rise. Now, back again to my question. You made mention of character and faking of leadership. Now, my question is, what happens when...
Hello, you are mute. Hello. I can't hear you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. What happened when good people come to power, particularly in the political environment, maybe as governors or as president or as ministers, and at the point of leaving power, we are disappointed as a citizen, as a country, that what we anticipate as of the time of coming, we couldn't see it in them at the point of exit. Could we say there were issues between their character and expectations of the citizenry? Or what could have been the loss in between the time they came to power and the time they exit power? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I think that is very, very important. That question is very, very important, and thank you very much. I think even from your question and from your narrative, it's very, very clear that we can see the conflict that is there between character and the self in leadership, because you are able to say that people are able to play out, and someone's character can easily be sat upon, and it's very difficult to see. And it's the same even in organizations where you find probably the top management thought that the person they employed through what they read through their CV was this very, very good person, and only to see that this person is not what they thought. The decisions that he's making are something that is completely different. And I've seen that in a number of political leaders, and I've wondered, because when they are campaigning, all you hear is these promises that they make, and little do we take time as the citizens to begin to check them, their character. Who are these people that we are choosing in leadership? And it is when they've gotten into leadership that we now begin to see who the true self is. And unfortunately, in most cases, They are not even playing it. Some of them are not even playing the character. That is who they really are. We did not just know who they were when we were choosing them into leadership. And that is where we really need to be very careful as a citizen, that when we have these leaders that are giving us their promises, we look at that and align it with their characters, because definitely they are coming from our own communities. Unless if we are getting someone that is away from our community and we don't know about them. But these are people that are coming from our own communities. Some of them we even know. For instance, like in South Africa, we were aware that this president who was coming in place had a sexual problem. But what did the masses say? They chose him and he became the president. Are we expecting that character to change? I don't think so.
No.
Probably the probability wise, we might say it could be 2 out of 10 or 2 out of 100, because the character, remember, denotes the kind of a person that that person is. So we have a lot of problems when it comes to society. So we need to be very careful with the kind of a people that we are choosing.
Thank you, ma. Thank you.
Ephraim has a hand up. Ephraim. Yes, Ephraim.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to us all.
I can't hear.
You can't
We
hear.
can hardly.
You can speak out, please.
John Mason once said that imitation breeds limitation, and you realize that.
Can we hear?
No, it's faint. It's faint. Can you
it's
speak
really
loud?
Faint, yes.
Mr. Ephraim, can you speak a bit louder?
Thank you very much, Doc, for the opportunity, and thank you, the presenter, for the presentation. The point I was asking is that John Mason once.
Justin, can you hear him?
It's not clear. Can you put the question in the chat box, Mr. Ephraim?
You can put it. Okay.
Chat box. Tsitsi.
Prof, let me ask the question before we move on.
Professor, I'm Doctor. Professor is Dave.
Okay, Doctor.
Yes, please.
So does it mean the use of self can be embedded in emotional intelligence? Because when you were discussing, you mentioned something about emotional intelligence. Can it be embedded into emotional intelligence?
That is one characteristic that will come out. I'm sure David also was able to raise that one up. That is another, because emotional intelligence is about being intelligent about the people that are around you, the decisions that you make, and many more. So you cannot remove that from a leader.
Yes, Bompati has a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Doc, for that insightful presentation. I just wanted to ask, I loved the example that you gave where you were working with a headmaster.
Yes.
There are a lot of leaders now in offices who are still like her or him. Now the question is, how do we, as employees, work with such kind of leaders? Or how do we approach them? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is something that is very difficult, and most of the times what we are told is that's the leader that you have at the moment. You work with that particular leader. It's almost like a political leader. They've got their 5-year mandate, and then I raise my hand up and I'm told you are anti-government and anything can happen to me in certain countries. As a head, for instance, as a deputy head, I had a way out because I decided it was time to go for studies. I realized that was not where I was supposed to be. So there are certain employees who will leave. They now have this self-critical dialogue of, should I leave or should I stay? Because then as they begin to reflect upon themselves, whether they can remain in that organization, if they decide to remain in that organization, probably like now, the situation in Africa or particularly Zambia, it is like the kind of a job that you are in, you need to hold on to it, because if you don't, then you lose it and you have no nothing to put on the table for your family. So people are in such kind of organizations because they have no way out. So they decide to leave. Well, there are other times when employees can come together and say, this is not how things are supposed to be. Leadership is supposed to be like this. And they can easily report to the top management. But again, you've got that kind of situation. If the top management are okay, they are seeing results, despite that leader not treating the workers well, the top management will keep him in because as far as they're concerned, the results are there.
Prof, doctor.
Yes.
Okay, doctor, let me correct myself. There are some questions.
Is that a prophecy?
Yes, so it's better you claim it now.
Yes.
Should the leader allow himself or herself to be manipulated and turned into a bad person by the society?
That is where if you saw the model that Dave gave is very, very important, because an authentic leader would not allow to be manipulated. There's a difference between control and power. You know, power has got a tendency of getting to someone's head and then begin to forget that he came from where the employees are. So being in control is different from being in power.
Thank you. How do you minimize friction with photocopy leader?
That's a good one. Can I ask Professor to probably make a comment on that one? Professor Dave?
Is he still around?
Please say it again. I'm sorry, please say it again.
How do you minimize friction with photocopy leader?
Friction with the leader.
With photocopy leader.
Counterfeit leader.
Yeah.
Counterfeit.
Yeah. The authentic leader. I still try to get at the base of what's really happening. So rather than go backwards or project forwards, the interaction that's occurring now needs to be identified in a real way. At least that's what I would attempt to do first. Are you aware that? Or my experience is the following, or that behavior triggers X for me or for all those other people or something. So if people will continue to resist anything honest about themselves or truthful about themselves, then it is like talking with a wall and you won't get very far. But I always want to start there with what is really going on now, not what happened in that last year or what you're promising for the future. What is the real impact of what's happening right now? That's where I'd start, I think.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
See, the other danger of counterfeit leaders is they have made themselves believe that is authentic.
Okay.
That's right. Yes.
So they become very difficult to deal with. Even when you are explaining that this is not how things are supposed to be, as far as they are concerned, that's what they are supposed to be.
That's right. And there was a question about toxic leadership, and that's exactly part of what that is.
Yes.
There is nothing wrong in the minds of the toxic leader. Mm-hmm. There's only wrong happening all around them.
Okay. Thank you, sir. There's another question from the chat. Do counterfeit leaders produce authentic results?
They may, because it's a role that they are playing. So they may, and that is why I said that there could even be a conflict with the workers and the top management. Because if the top management are seeing results, they will say, wow, he's showing results. But right here at the grassroots, things are not happening. The people that are there are probably treated like machines.
Okay.
I had a situation in one organization where I worked where I was told, can you fire this guy? Because he came late, I think almost on 3 or 4 occasions. And I was told he just needs to go, fire him. And I thought, no, there could be a reason, because from history, this person was not coming late. So I decided I'll go for a meal with him. So I took him out for a meal. And when we finally got to a nice talking stage, then I asked him what was going on. And I was really, really sad to hear that he had just gotten married, and there was no compatibility with his wife. The wife was like, dripping rain, and he couldn't tolerate her. So what he decided to do was go home late after he has drunk himself off and sleep in the lounge. And the wife now was punishing him by not waking him up when it was time to go to work. So he started coming late. So sitting there, I began to check with him. Who are your friends? Do you go to a church? Do you have counselors there? Or can we find you somebody who can counsel you? And I should be able to report back that that person changed. You see, and sometimes that's what we really need to do with employees. It's not that all of them are dull, they can't think. No, but as leaders, we need to be aware. Our presence should begin to impact on these employees.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Doctor, for your.
I'm professor now.
Yeah, I've made you one. I want to hand over let me appreciate you, our two facilitators, for wonderful presentations. I hope every participant have gained one thing or the other in the whole program. So I want to hand over to Dr. Justin to conclude for his closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you so much, Professor Grace. And thank you so much, Dev, for honoring our invitation. Can I ask Sasha to say something? Sasha will be our guest next week. Sasha, are you in a position to say something? A comment from you as we expect you next week. Sasha.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so today was a really informative session, and I really appreciate all the information you guys have shared. Next week, I'm really looking forward to sharing information with you guys about how to create and the importance of collaborative and inclusive structures and processes within your organization to really help you better deliver your business results and or mission impacts if you're a private or a public institution. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, definitely come next week. And I know there's a couple other speakers who are going to be diving into some of the elements a little bit more in terms of family businesses and operational policies as well. So I think it'll be an interesting session.
Thank you so much. We encourage our participants to read around the presenters on time so that we know how to relate the conversations when they are presenting. For me, I will just say thank you so much before I hand over to Dr. Dotun to close this session on our behalf. Thank you so much, Dave, for this time. We look forward to have you again in other sessions. And Christine is part of us, and we look forward to have more collaborations outside of OLDN. We don't believe in exclusively OLDN conversations. We also want to be invited in UNICAF, in
please,
all universities and all centers that are represented. Yes. Cross-collaboration and the sharing of knowledge is fundamental to the developments that we want to see at self, families, organizations, and at societal level. I appreciate you. We are honored to have you on this session, and thank you so much. Dr. Dotun, are you with us? You can close today's session.
Once again, thank you very much, Professor Jamieson. It's been wonderful. I have read about your high use of self, and I'm so excited to see you live here. And listening to you has actually brought a lot of excitement to us all at OLDN, so that we can go back to our communities, our workplaces, our societies, our families, and more importantly to ourselves, so that we can develop and become the better version of ourselves. And more importantly, you inch so much on self-reflection, which at OLDN we'll be trying to work around, but for some reasons we have not been able to appreciate it. But with this, your reinforcement, I think we'll go back to start bringing it up and then begin to work on ourselves. Thank you, Professor, for having you. Doctor, I don't know how to thank you very much because you actually dealt with the issue of character and their expectations in leadership. And for us all, I think it's something we need to take away from here so that we start beginning to audit and x-ray ourselves. How better are we? What kind of leaders are we? Are we faking? Are we original? Are we really authentic? And how do we collaborate our authenticity with our character so that we can produce good results in all areas of our endeavors? It's so good to have you. Thank you very much for putting in all your energy and passion and commitment. I want to thank Professor Grace also for taking time out. I know how busy you are. You are also a member of the panel of inquiry, yet you still find time to be here. We thank you very much for being here. All our invitees, we thank you very much for being here. We thank you for making it truly an igniting conversation. And if you have not joined OLDN, please, we invite you. I could see Ms. Fumbi Matthew. She's an OLD consultant too. We want to see you here. I could see Oni as well. I could see Bukola also. Please do join us at OLDN and let's continue to affect our world, our society, our community, our workplace, our career, and ourselves. See you next week as we come again for another insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much and bye-bye.
Professor Shijoke, it's been a while. Professor Shijoke, it's been a while, sir. Hello, Prof.